My name is Stephanie Stock, and I'm the president of Ohio for Advocates for Medical Freedom. We are really excited today to be able to bring Ohioans interviews from both of our candidates running against Dictator DeWine in 2022. Today, we have with us business owner and former Congressman Jim Renacci. Jim grew up in a blue collar union family in Western Pennsylvania and moved to Ohio over 30 years ago. After being the first in his family to graduate college, the entrepreneur soon laid claim to operating over 60 businesses, creating 1,500 new jobs, and employing over 3,000 people statewide. In 2009, the Obama administration took over General Motors, shutting dealerships down across the country, including Jim's in Northeast Ohio. Upset at the impact this had within his local community, Jim decided to run for Congress, 16th district in 2010 and won. Jim says his allegiance is with the everyday Americans forgotten by the swamp, and that he hopes to bring actionable results back to the working people who gave him a voice. So thank you so much, Jim, for being with us today. You've been crazy busy, so we appreciate you taking the time to get your voice heard on one of the most important issues facing our state and our nation, which is medical freedom. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And thank you for that introduction. And I think it's important for the people watching to realize that I didn't get into politics to be involved in politics. I got into politics because I saw my rights being taken away from me and my business being taken away from me. That's the reason I stepped up. And that's the reason I wish so many other people would step up as well.
Yeah, I think we need to take back our government one seat at a time, whether it's school boards or county commissioner or whatever. We have to just step up to the plate and start being our government again and not expecting someone else to do it for us. So getting into the issue of medical freedom, what do you know about the medical freedom movement and what place do you believe it has in our society?
Well, again, thank you for having me. Look, medical freedom is a broad issue. In my opinion, it includes several important issues. These include, the right to try for cancer and other terminal patients, the right to use supplements, vitamins, and herbs to improve your health, and the use of many other traditional Eastern medicine techniques. But most importantly, in my opinion, it means that patients should have equal say in their medical treatment, and vaccines should not be mandated.
Yeah, well, obviously, we completely agree with all of those things. Bodily autonomy, parental rights. We need to be making our own decisions. Nobody else should be making those for us. So, and I think COVID has taught us that lesson. Certainly, the things that we have lost in the name of public health, the liberties we've lost it's been astounding. With regard to COVID-19, it's easy to say we would have all done things differently, in hindsight, looking at how DeWine handled things. Do you believe that Governor DeWine was working within his authority when he declared the public health emergency and continued the shutdown beyond the 2 weeks that he claimed would flatten the curve? And what would you have done differently? And how would you handle a future potential emergency?
Well, absolutely. The answer is no. I do not believe he had the authority. And a lot of people ask me that question. They say, well, what would you have done different? Well, it's pretty simple. Number one, I wouldn't have appointed a medical director and then just stood behind her and let her make the decision. She's an unelected official, but he used that position to basically do what he wanted to do. He should be the one stepping up, making those decisions. But I think his decisions were unconstitutional. I don't think, look, it goes back to my business. They took my Chevy dealership away from me. In many ways, that was government interference in a private business. It's the reason I ran for Congress. It's the reason I stepped up. I don't believe this governor had the right to determine what business was essential, what business wasn't essential. I don't believe he had the right to say, what a curfew should be. I don't believe he should have had the right to mandate masks. These are all unconstitutional acts. And look, I go back to what my good friend, Governor Kristi Noem, said when I talked to her about this. He had a choice. And she did too. She listened to the medical community. She listened to the medical providers. And then she listened to her constitutional attorneys. And when she was done, she realized that all of the things she was going to do that people like Governor DeWine were doing were unconstitutional. I would have run the state very similar to what Governor Kristi Noem did. and also what Governor DeSantis did. I don't believe our freedom should have been taken away from us. I don't believe the governor has that right. I don't believe the governor had the right to change the election. All of these things were an infringement on our rights that this governor has done. And I think in the end, this should be one of the reasons why he never gets reelected.
Oh, well, we are praying he doesn't get reelected. And I agree. I'm glad you threw in about the election because that was horrifying. I was just stunned that our primary was interfered with in that way. It was unbelievable, unprecedented. What are your thoughts on the Fauci emails that were FOIA requested, specifically claiming that DeWine was a governor that would fall in line with Democrats like Whitmore, Newsom, and Cuomo in order to create a demand for a global COVID response corps? Why do you think he would join forces with leftist leaders rather than following the lead of red state leaders like DeSantis and Nome? Is it because he's not a true Republican, perhaps?
Well, here's what I would tell you. I ran for governor. I left Washington. As many of you know, I got elected by defeating a Democrat. Then the swamp redistricted me into another Democrat seat, so I had to defeat a second Democrat. The establishment didn't want me in Washington, and that's okay. But I also realized after 6 years that Washington was broken, and the only way to fix Washington was to have strong leaders in our state government and in our governor's chair, which is why I ran against Governor DeWine in 2017. I knew Governor DeWine 2.5 years ago was not the right person. I can tell you, if you look at his history, look at his voting record, look at what he did in Washington, look at his votes. He voted with the Democratic Party multiple times. He was not voting with Republican principles and policies. And I knew that's the way he would run our state. And clearly, 2.5 years later, we are seeing the exact same Governor DeWine that we saw with Senator DeWine and House Member DeWine, and in many cases, his complete history. He has always sided multiple times with the Democrats. I don't believe he's a Republican. I get mad, people get mad at me when I say that, but he clearly is a left center Republican, if he's anything, which means he's a center Democrat with many of his policies. And I think this is one of the reasons why the Fauci emails expose those kind of things. This is a problem. And it's one of the reasons why I ran against him. Looking back, I wish, a lot of people say, well, you left the governor's race and went to the Senate race. That's because the President of the United States, Donald Trump, asked me to get out of the governor's race and into the Senate race. But I will tell you one thing. If you go back to that time when I was asked, the establishment again was playing in the game, and they were trying to get me out of the governor's race because I was going to defeat Governor DeWine in 2018. They knew it. That's the reason why they convinced the president to call me. And looking back over it, probably one of the worst moves I ever made. But I will also tell you, I still have a lot of respect for President Trump, and it was especially his policies. It was one of the reasons why I did it. When the President of the United States calls you, it's very difficult to say no to the President of the United States.
Yeah, I imagine it would be difficult. And I agree with you. I think, some of his advisors are probably not giving him the best information. And unfortunately, he depends on that. So, you can't fault the president for everything he does, because again, a lot of that information comes from incorrect sources, unfortunately. So getting back to talking about private business, because I know that that's a biggie for you. Republicans typically represent voters that oppose big government. We don't want interference in the free market, et cetera. We do have some Republicans that believe passing HB 248 is an infringement on the rights of business owners. Do you personally believe that a private business owner's rights supersede those of the individual that is a worker with regard to mandated vaccines in the workplace? And what would your stance be on passing a bill like 248 that would prevent government entities as well as private businesses from discriminating against you or firing you based solely on your vaccination status?
Yeah, well, first off, I don't believe the vaccination is personal. I don't believe we should have passports. I don't believe there should be a record, and I don't believe you should be discriminated in any way from employment. The issue, though, that does come out, and I think it's important, and I would support a bill like House Bill 248 is there is nothing today. That's one of the reasons why House Bill 248 is important. There's nothing today other than discrimination and other than the ADA. There is nothing today that would stop a private business from being allowed to do some of those things as long as they're not discriminating. So we do need those protections for individuals. And that's probably one of the biggest confusions people have gotten from my takeaway is that without 248, a private individual rights, a private business rights, with as long as they're not discriminating and as long as they're not violating ADA, it's very difficult for a business to be told they cannot do this. I can tell you personally, I would not require it. I don't think it should be required. And I do think something like House Bill 248, I would support to make sure that individual freedoms are not violated. But that's why we have House Bill 248. You know, I spoke with Attorney Bentz, I think that's his name, who's a big supporter of medical freedom. He's agreed that other than discrimination and other than ADA, that's why we need to solidify the rights of individuals with House Bill 248.
Yeah, I definitely support, businesses have the right to mandate a lot of things. If they want to make you wear a crazy hat, steel-toed shoes, throw a sign up with a hot dog on it, whatever, like that you sign up for. But when we get to the point where there's nothing to protect an employee from entering your body with a medical product, that is a line that somebody has to draw in the sand. So HB 248 does that. And I know that it's difficult for some Republicans to swallow that idea that you would be able to tell a business owner something. But I mean, we have regulations about, food handling and various different things that aren't even an infringement on a person's, personal self. And this is, so I think it's because we've allowed the mandates on healthcare workers since 2013. I think that because that kind of went under the radar, it's sort of an accepted standard a little bit. And so it's going to be really hard to change that narrative. And I think it's going to take a lot of business owners like yourself coming out and saying, look, like there's a lot of things I don't want the government to tell me what to do about my business, but I shouldn't be able to tell another person what to do with their body just because they're my employee. That's kind of a dictatorship position and an abuse of power. So I appreciate you saying that, because it's vitally important that business owners, stand up for individuals' rights, so that we can get something like this into law, because there's a lot of businesses that simply don't care, like Matt Heck's office and it's surprisingly there's even landscaping companies mandating this. Mally's Chocolates is mandating this vaccine for all their employees. So it's pretty hard to watch. There's a lot of people that are deciding between a paycheck and providing for their families or having a medical procedure forced on them. So I'm so thankful that you support that.
Well, by the way, I do want to add, I 100% support individual rights. I mean, look, and I don't support, especially a vaccine that has not gone through all of the testing. Nobody should be required to get a vaccine, but if they want the vaccine, they should be also allowed to get it. So it's both sides. It's the freedom and having the right to make that decision and not being forced on you.
Oh, absolutely. OAMF has always supported. I don't know. They continue to call us an anti-vaccine organization. We're not. We support anyone's right to access to. I mean, if we felt like there was a serious infringement on people's ability to access a vaccine if they wanted it, we would actually fight for their right too, because it is about the person's right to choose. So I'm with you. Both sides of the aisle. If you want it, great, get it. If you don't, you don't. And that's definitely your personal choice.
By the way, I want to add one other thing. It's like mask. I've had some people say to me, I believe mask is your choice. If you want to wear it, fine. If you don't want to wear it, fine. And for the listeners, I want to make sure people understand, because there's some posts of me with a mask on. My son had an infant child and he asked us to wear a mask. You know what? That's my right. That's my right to protect, to allow, and especially in a family setting. I wasn't mandated. The government didn't mandate. And my son asked us to do it. And we did it. That was for that. So I truly believe, and that's why I want to explain that, because people say, well, he wore a mask. No. It's your individual right. If you want to wear a mask, you should have the ability to do it. If you don't want to wear a mask, that's your individual right. Nobody should mandate that, but nobody should also mandate that you shouldn't wear a mask if you want to wear a mask.
Yeah, I do. It's unfortunate. I do see a lot of politicians get attacked. Like if they have a photo with a mask on, or if they're not a real Republican. Listen, there are a lot of things at play. Like you said, sometimes it's a family member, and I know your son's a doctor, so he may have had a little bit more nervousness about the infant. So people have got to really they got to lay off this business that if you ever see someone with a mask on, that there's some sort of a hypocrite. You know what? Maybe one day they just wanted to go to Trader Joe's and they didn't want to get badgered, and you got a photo of them. Like, cut them some slack, right? It's America. If we're gonna fight for the right to be able to decline a mask, we shouldn't be judging people that have to wear it for various things, or if they want to wear it for various things. So I'm totally with you, Jim, on that. Couldn't agree more. Um, as we've seen in the last 16 months, I think that the government and even some businesses, they've been successful at creating an environment that's really based on fear. You know, the illness is about 99% plus recovery rate. They've gotten people so riled up. They're running to get in line for an experimental vaccine that hasn't even gone through phase 3 clinical trials. Now that people have been conditioned this long to live in fear, do you believe this level of hysteria could be generated again over a different viral illness or pandemic in the future? What do you, I mean, do you think people could fall into that trap again?
Well, absolutely, I do. I do believe that fear was pushed by Governor DeWine. I do believe that one of the biggest things and one of the biggest issues was this governor pushed fear. He didn't push hope. I mean, fear was the day he comes out with his medical director who says there's going to be 10,000 cases a day. The hospitals are going to be overridden. He scared people. And he scared people like my mother, who'll be 95 this year. She still is fearful of not having a mask on because of what people said. This is what we should not be pushing. We shouldn't push fear. We should push hope. Sadly enough, though, I do think governors like DeWine and Cuomo and other Democrat governors push that fear so much that it will be embedded in the future. They're already talking about the variant. They're already talking about, again, when I talk to my 94-year-old mother, she says, well, how about this variant? I mean, this is the fear factor that is being pushed now. But you're right, 99.2% recovery rate, whatever the numbers are. I mean, it's something that will be embedded in the future, but not if we have good leadership. That's why we need to change leadership in Ohio. We need to change the governor's seat. Won't be easy. He has the establishment. He's going to spend a lot of money. He's going to make people happy. We have to be able to come together and say no more to this governor. But you're going to watch some tricks over the next year. He's going to look like the greatest Republican in the world, spending our taxpayer money, not his money, to make people forget about the fear and try and show hope. It's too late. He's the one who pushed fear. He now has it embedded in our society, and we're going to have to change that in the future.
Yeah, for a long time we were saying tyranny. We're in this together.
Yeah.
And that's what he's done. I mean, I have never witnessed a fear campaign roll out like this did. And Governor DeWine, he was at the top of the list. I mean, people say Cuomo was bad, and he is, but I mean, him hiding behind a Republican name and pulling all this off. I don't know. He's almost worse to me in the book there. Speaking to a possible future pandemic or viral illness scare, we HB 248 was written specifically to protect Ohioans from current and future vaccine mandates that might come down the pipeline. Some are suggesting that the bill only cover COVID-19 choice. Do you believe in an individual's right to make their own choices regarding any vaccine? Would you agree with some of these Republicans that are trying to get 248 watered down to COVID only? And how's that going to play out if this fall it's influenza, RSV, or some other issue, and we've pushed for legislation that's COVID only legislation? Maybe you could speak to that a little bit.
Well, look, I've said that all along. I am a big believer in individual rights. I'm a big believer in individual freedoms. I'm a big believer that if anybody wants a flu shot, a COVID shot, any shots, if they want it, they should be able to get it. If they don't want it, they should not get it. And children, again, the parents should have the ability to say no, whether they're going to school on any of these shots, vaccines, whatever. This is pretty simple stuff. I mean, you either have the right, the individual right, or you don't have the individual right. Government should be infringing. Look, I'm going to go back to a couple times in my history. I have fought government multiple times for infringing in my rights. I have a history of it, whether it goes back to um, 2001 when I was taxed excessively by the government and fought it for 14 years in the Supreme Court and won against Governor DeWine. Whether it was my dealership being taken away from me, I understand what infringement of your individual rights and your business rights because it's affected me. You know, it just wasn't COVID where I woke up and said, oh, I don't like the government. I have fought the government multiple times because of these things. I do not believe that individual rights should be taken away from anybody. And I can show you multiple times where I've stood up and not only said it, but fought it.
Good. Well, that we love to hear that. Consistency is really important because there's a lot of politicians that have no problem stabbing you in the back once they get in. So, you know, that's why interviews like this and getting people's stances on important issues is vital because we need that accountability. You know, it's what can get you your seat or take away your seat next time. So I appreciate that you have a history supporting individual rights. To speak a little bit to parental rights, Florida Governor DeSantis has been busy signing many bills into law. One of these bills is the Parents' Bill of Rights, which is AB 241. This bill provides parental rights to a minor child's education, upbringing, and health care. There's been a really big push in a lot of the blue states to undermine parental rights and parental consent, especially with regard to medical decisions for children as young as 12. What is your position on a parent's right to decide what's best for his or her child, especially when it comes to medical freedom issues, you know, vaccination or health education in schools? And do you believe there's ever a time when the government should be able to override the wishes of a judgment of a parent?
Well, absolutely not. Again, that's an infringement on individual rights. Again, some of this stuff is so simple, and it's interesting because it's the Democrat governors and the Democrat states that appear to be infringing on our rights. And it's mostly Republican states that are trying to protect our rights, except for Ohio, where sometimes I have to question whether it's a Republican-led state with Governor DeWine. But look, I would support those pieces of legislation that are coming through. And by the way, that's probably the difference. One of the differences between me and maybe some of the other candidates is I don't believe a governor also has the right to dictate. You know, a governor can't say, well, we're not going to do this. A governor can say, I don't support doing this. And then the governor has to get the legislature to step in and do it. And that's the real key. You said something important, that Governor DeSantis is signing legislative bills. That's because the House and the Senate in Florida is moving strong legislative bills that protect individual rights, and Governor DeSantis is signing those bills. I would do the exact same thing. I do not believe a governor has the right to say, this is the way it's going to be, or that's the way it's going to be. And I hear that too often in other candidates. They're saying, this is the way it's going to be. No, we have a system where the governor does not have that type of authoritative power. He or she has to work with the legislature. So I would support those bills. I would also push for those bills. But in the end, we got to get the legislature to bring those bills forward and pass them.
Yeah, I think we have witnessed multiple times, you know, the governor just decides he's going to veto everything. I mean, he's just you have to, you go into legislative action now with the idea that you're just going to submit a bill and you're going to have a veto. You're going to have enough votes for a veto override. If it's anything of worth to anyone in the state, you need to know you're going to have enough votes for a veto override. And that is a terrible place for us to be in Ohio, that we can't even count on our bills to go through the legislature and have a chance of being signed anything that matters other than pumpkin license plates or you know, another Groundhog Day or something. I mean, you know, those things, they go through no problem, but vital legislation seems to get held up or, you know, gets vetoed. So we definitely need a governor that's willing to to accept, hey, if the legislative body that represents the people, if this passes and if this comes to me, if this is what the people want, I need to respect that, unless it's something that's, absolutely unconstitutional or something like that. We shouldn't be having all of these vetoes. So I'm glad that you respect the process.
Well, and I would also add, what's interesting is I don't think the governor should be butting in advance by saying, I'm going to veto something. Let the process occur. Let the hearings occur. Let all the debate occur. Let the bill get its day and its process before you step in. This governor seems to want to always say he's going to veto things even before the process starts. He hasn't even heard the testimony. He hasn't even heard the witnesses, and he's going to veto. The governor should be listening, and you're exactly right. The legislature is the voice of the people, and the governor should be listening to the voice of the people, unless he or she believes that there is an infringement of the Constitution, but then he or she should be talking about the infringement of the Constitution, not their personal opinion as to why they're going to veto something.
Yep, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. Um, Going back to our kids, we've had a lot of backtracking with WHO, CDC, NIH, how they handled everything. We had Americans unquestioningly, following every recommendation for quite a while there. So long, in fact, that now a lot of, business owners, school boards, people, they're actually afraid to accept the removal of restrictions. They're still like your mom, afraid to kind of maybe go out, afraid to take their mask off. We know how it's affecting the adults, but how do you think these fear-based campaigns and the handling of this virus this past year, what do you think the long-term social and emotional effects are going to be on the health of our children and their futures?
Well, look, I think it's changed. This was definitely a major change to not only an infringement of rights when it comes to masks, when it comes to injections, when it comes to, our youth. Our youth were affected. They were taken out of school for an entire year. They lost an entire year of their life. That's not fair to them. They will never forget that. They will look back over this. They'll remember it when they're 50, 60, or 70 years old. The day, and hopefully this is the only thing they remember, because we never let it happen again. So again, I can tell you that many decisions were made, a lot was done, but without having all the facts. And I agree with you, things have changed. I mean, look at the rate of recovery. Look at the death rate over this. Now all of a sudden people are saying masks don't work, masks work. In the end, we should have always fallen back on the individual rights and not taken away the devastation that will occur with businesses. 40% of bars and restaurants will never make it back because of the overreach of this governor and several governors who decided, several Democrat governors who decided that they were going to become the mandate and take away individual freedoms, personal rights, all of these things. So I think when it comes to our children, they're never going to forget this. Let's just hope this is the only time they look back and remember something like this.
Yeah, and I think, they're looking to us, as their parents, they're looking to the government, somebody to protect them and their future. And, I'm really concerned about what we're going to see in the schools this fall. I mean, as far as discrimination, as the vaccine gets approved for younger ages, and with DeWine pushing it the way he is, I think we're already seeing notifications coming from schools that kids that aren't vaccinated are going to have to maintain the masks, which we know are going to be devastating for them. They're going to be quarantined. If they test positive, they're going to be quarantined, which means these kids involved in sports, they're not going to be able to go to their away games or whatever. It's going to conflict possibly, seniors that are looking at college and they want to get seen in sports and this is their senior year. I mean, we're going to have kids under an immense amount of pressure and discriminatory action being taken against them. And I think about their mental health and what that's going to do to them. And I just hope that everyone's going to step up, and that parents in particular are going to step up and speak out and say, look, it's bad enough we have discrimination on us and pressure on us, but allowing that for our children is just we can't allow it. We just simply can't allow it. So I'm glad that you're on board with parental rights and protecting that. And again, with HB 248, that would give our kids the protection that they need. So we just have to put a lot of pressure on and get something passed for our people and specifically for our kids. I'm sure you've seen the reports. We've got a lot of things coming in regarding heart inflammation after taking the COVID-19 shot for younger children, like 12 to 18. Why do you think there's such a heavy push from DeWine to inoculate kids for a virus that's either very little effect or almost not at all? I think it's like 0.003% or something death rate in kids. How do you feel about him pushing that in the kid population?
Well, here's what I would tell you about Governor DeWine. He's like driving a car. Once he pushes the gas pedal, he wants to push it as fast as he can go. Shame on him. He believes he's right. He's not listening. One of his greatest failures is he's not listening. One of his greatest reasons why he's losing so much support from the General Assembly is that he doesn't talk to them. He doesn't listen to them. It's all about him. It's all about, I have never seen a governor believe he is so right that he will not listen. And I can tell you that's one of his greatest flaws. But I will tell you one of his greatest assets. He is able to raise a whole bunch of money to be able to tell people how great he is. And I'm hoping that people remember what he did during the pandemic, because the biggest problem in our society is that we have this, that too often people forget. And I'm hoping they never forget how much he has pushed this, how much he has pushed this to our children, how much he has pushed the mandates. And remember, the only reason he stepped back and said, I'm releasing and all these mandates are going to be lifted is two things. He knew that the General Assembly was going to remove them, a couple of weeks later. This governor believes he's right. He is not listening. His greatest flaw is he doesn't listen.
Oh yeah, I was actually going to mention that if you didn't bring it up. He climbed up on his tiny little podium fast, waving his hand about, oh, I'm rolling back the mandates of my own accord. The same day the legislature was, signing the resolution to remove all the orders. So, yeah, he plays a good game, and I anticipate he will have many tricks up his sleeve in the coming months to try to appear like the governor everyone wants. But we will remember his actions for the last 16 months. So I think whatever amount of money that Governor DeWine has, I think he's going to be unpleasantly surprised by next election. That's what we hope for anyway. I'd like to talk just for a minute about censorship. I don't know if you know, but OhioAMF specifically was heavily censored last year, obviously because of the kind of content we were bringing forward about the mask issues and controversial issues that people wanted to look at. But Facebook and the powers that be didn't want people to see. About the week after HB 248 was introduced, we were actually deplatformed on Facebook. So they completely removed us. We had 44,000 followers. There's other medical freedom organizations, doctors, experts, scientists, people that have been posting negative experiences about, side effects from the COVID shot and things like that. And they've been censored or had, their pages removed. Do you believe open dialogue and debate should always be had, whether it's a controversial issue or not, rather than deplatforming? And as governor, what would your thoughts be on working with the legislature should they produce a bill that might prevent big tech from silencing free speech on Ohioans?
Well, look, yes, most certainly, I do believe that First Amendment rights should never be infringed upon, and all sides of the issue should be discussed, and everybody should have the opportunity to bring their points forward. I would also 100% love to see the legislature, and I would do a lot of things that Governor DeSantis has said he's going to do, as long as it's within the law, to make sure that we look at ways that big tech companies do not get, whether it's funding from the federal state government, whatever those things are, if they're going to censor free speech. There is nothing more powerful that gives the United States of America the freedoms we have than that First Amendment. And we should always treasure and protect the First Amendment rights, as we should the Second Amendment rights, and as we should many of the other amendments, but especially the First Amendment rights. So I think there are ways you can do it. I think as a governor, you can stand up against it. One of the problems I have with Governor DeWine, and one of the reasons I jumped into this race is, number one, we need somebody who can beat him. But number two, he doesn't even step up and talk about it. He doesn't even get into the game and say, we got to stop this. He just goes about his way, comes back on, talks about masks and mandates and COVID. Today he's talking about spending $2 billion on infrastructure. How about stepping up someday and saying, we can't have this by big tech, and I'm going to do whatever's necessary to stop it. I mean, there are so many things that this governor doesn't seem to want to talk about, including pay for play, by the way. And I do think big tech is one of the reasons why he's not saying anything, because some big tech companies have contributed to his campaign. But I think these are the issues that need to be talked about that this governor doesn't want to talk about, but they should be. They should be important. I would defend our rights as a First Amendment, and I believe all positions should be heard.
Yep, and I think you hit the nail on the head with the idea that everything comes back to money, right? If you threaten big tech companies, hey, you're not going to get this government kickback if you don't, let people have a voice, things like that. That works, right? It works. So maybe that's the tactics we got to take with some of these people to give us our rights back is to tell them you're not getting kickbacks if you don't. So I think money talks. I know you got a busy day and we got to get things wrapped up. I thank you so much for taking the time to specifically get your stance out on the medical freedom issue, which, like I said, is really, really important to most Ohioans at this point. Did you have any final thoughts for our viewers on why you feel you're best equipped to represent the people of Ohio, specifically, in the area of personal medical choice and parental rights and just freedom?
Well, absolutely. I think my history shows that I've always been a big believer in private rights, personal rights, individual freedoms, individual rights. At the same time, beating Governor DeWine, an incumbent governor, beating an incumbent is a very difficult task. If you look at the percentages, and they're almost the same percentages as the COVID, we were talking about the COVID recovery being 99%. Guess what? The ability for an incumbent to win is almost 99%. When I say that, that doesn't mean he cannot be defeated. The way he will be defeated, though, is to rally behind an individual who best can not only win, has the ability to get his message out, his or her message, and at the same time protects those individual freedoms and individual rights. I think if you look at my history, you're going to see that I have always been a big believer in individual freedoms and individual rights. I will continue to be that person. I didn't jump into this race because I wanted to be governor. I jumped into this race because I want DeWine to be defeated. And I have not saw anyone. I stood back. I thought Jim Jordan was going to run. I talked to Jim. He said he wasn't going to run. I stood back. I waited because I heard that Warren Davidson might run. I talked to Warren Davidson. He was wishy-washy about it. But we need somebody who can defeat Mike DeWine. That's the key, not just somebody who can get in there. Now, by the way, they have to have the medical, the ability to protect individual rights at the same time. I think you have that in me, but we have to have somebody who can defeat Mike DeWine. I think I'm that individual. That's the reason I stepped in. I just told somebody on a phone call before this, I don't have to be in this race. I want to be in this race to protect people, their children, their grandchildren. I have a grandson. My first grandson will be 1 year old on July 7th of this year. I am more concerned and scared about what we're giving and leaving my children and my grandchildren than ever in the history of this country. And I do believe we need to have people who can step in and take back our freedoms and win. And that's the key. I do believe I'm the only candidate today that can win. I'm hoping that I can get the support of Ohioans, and I'm hoping that we can all come together behind one candidate, because defeating Governor DeWine will not be easy. But it can be done if we all come together, work together to defeat and make sure that we have a state that protects individual freedoms and individual rights. I thank you for having me today. And again, God bless all of you. God bless this state. It's been a great state for me. Gave me the opportunity as a poor kid 38 years ago with just a couple $100 in the bank to live the American dream, as you said, create jobs, employ people. I love Ohio, and I want to make sure that in the future, our children, our grandchildren have the same ability to say they love Ohio too.
Yeah, but would you like to maybe give the name of your website in case any of our members would like to volunteer for your campaign or learn more about you?
Sure, absolutely. JimRenacci.com, JimRenacci.com, JimRenacci.com. I want to remind everybody, this fight just didn't happen with COVID. Go back, you're going to see I formed the Ohio Future Foundation in January of 2019. I never believed Mike DeWine would be the right governor from Ohio. I've been fighting his policies since the day he was elected. It's one of the reasons why the establishment has disengaged and wants nothing to do with Jim Renacci. I have not talked to the chairman of, I've not talked to Jane Timken, the past chairman, since January of 2019, when she told me that she would support Mike DeWine and John Husted no matter what. And I asked her the question, would you support them even if they're taking us over the cliff? And she said, yes, I would. I'll never forget that day. But that is one of the reasons why I've been fighting for Ohio long before COVID. COVID just accelerated the reasons why we should not allow Governor DeWine to ever get back in that seat. So JimRenacci.com, again, thank you for having me. I'd like to add one more thing. I don't think elections are binary choices anymore. I will admit this to your listeners. I did not vote for Mike DeWine in the general election. I did not vote for Cordray either. I've told people this many, many times. I think when both cars are being driven by somebody who's going to drive it over the cliff, and I use this analogy because at the time, my 1-year-old grandson, if I had the choice of putting him in the seat of either car and both of them were going over the cliff, I would rather just hold on to him and not take the chance on either car. Elections aren't binary choices anymore. Elections have to be for the person who you believe best represents you. And if neither candidate do, I don't think you vote for either of them.
I appreciate you giving your stance. It gives people insight into who they want to back way ahead. I mean, this, we still got almost a year. So this gives people an opportunity to get behind a candidate and start, pressing forward and being boots on the ground for the person that you think will represent them the best. So definitely visit Jim's website. For those of you that want to know more about Ohio Advocates for Medical Freedom and our fight for you on the medical freedom issue, OhioAMF.org. And for information on HB 248, the Vaccine Choice and Anti-Discrimination Act, please go to Vote Yes on HB248.com. Find out what the most recent call to action is and help us get that bill passed into law and protect individual rights and discrimination in the workplace, schools, and for protection for everyone, basically, from infant to elderly person. We all should have the same rights. So thank you again, Jem, for being with us, and we'll let you get back to your busy day, and good luck with you on your campaign.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.